You've been through a lot of these shutdown scenarios before, and I'm wondering what your gut tells you now. Does this meeting lead to something today? Is there an 11th hour save, or should we prepare for the lights to go out?
It would be wonderful if the big boys and the big girls in Washington, if we could get our act together and avoid the shutdown, but it really doesn't look like that's going to happen. It feels to me like we've got an 85% chance of going into shutdown. We have passed a bipartisan short-term funding deal out of the House on a bipartisan basis. Chuck Schumer does not seem interested in accepting that deal, and I think he seems pretty committed to a shutdown. I think that's where we're headed.
Congressman, do you see any sort of compromise that could emerge, in particular when it comes to extending the Obamacare premium subsidies that are set to expire? It seems like there might be some wiggle room on that provision, at least, whether that happens now or down the road if this short-term stopgap measure gets through.
What has sometimes been said is that nothing is as eternal as a government program. This is a little bit of proof of that. Here we've got some special assistance on health care, some subsidies that were put into place during the pandemic. And here we are having a hard time getting rid of them. Listen, let's say that reasonable people can disagree about whether or not working class Americans should have these additional enhanced tax credits. Most of the benefits go to insurance companies, but let's just set that aside and say reasonable people can disagree about that. What we shouldn't be debating is whether or not we're going to spend $1.5 trillion of new spending as a part of a 6-week short-term stopgap funding deal. This is really unprecedented that the Democrats are saying that, no, rather than negotiate on the health care stuff while the government is open, we prefer to negotiate while the government is shuttered. It seems like they're taking the American people hostage, and I just don't see how Republicans can go along with that.
Would you vote yes on a CR that had an extension of the Obamacare subsidies, or is that a deal breaker for you, Congressman? Because I know that you also have a piece of legislation that would deal with this on a much shorter term level and, in fact, prevent the government, if I read it right, from ever shutting down.
Yeah, shutdowns are stupid. We should not shut down. My bill with Senator Ron Johnson in the Senate, the Eliminate Shutdowns Act, would say anytime the clowns in D.C., we can't get our act together, rather than take the American economy hostage, we're just going to have a short-term 14-day CR to allow the politicians to get to yes. And that is, in essence, exactly what the Republican offer is today. Not for 2 weeks, but for 6 or 7 weeks until the Friday before Thanksgiving. It is unprecedented that a party would say, no, we don't want to negotiate for 6 weeks. Instead of negotiating, we're going to shut the whole thing down because we can't secure $1.5 trillion in new health care subsidies. I just think Chuck Schumer is asking for heaven and earth and spending and health care for illegal aliens and health care subsidies for rich Americans. There is no way on God's green earth that Republicans are going to give all of that up in return for just a 6-week stopgap.
Well, Congressman, what's also raised the stakes of these negotiations, perhaps, is that we know that there's been this OMB memo threatening permanent layoffs if the government does shut down. Do you think that's the right strategy here by Republicans to potentially use a shutdown period to slash the federal workforce?
In general, the party that loses the shutdown loses it because they don't seem reasonable. So right now, today, it's pretty clear to me that the Republican ask is very basic. It's not a Republican win or a Democrat win. It's just, hey, let's keep the government open for 6 weeks while we negotiate. That is eminently reasonable, which means that I think that the current environment means that Democrats probably are going to be in some trouble. Now, I understand what the administration's trying to do, and Lord knows there is plenty waste, fraud, and abuse to cut. So if they use that scalpel in a way that seems targeted and appropriate, I think it can help the messaging. If they go in and they do things that are a little bit more nuclear, I think that could make Republicans seem not quite so reasonable. That could shift the political landscape. So I would just say I expect the administration to do the right thing in cutting government during the shutdown. I don't think it's just a threat. I think Russ' vote is absolutely serious. I think he and President Trump are going to cut the places they think are appropriate to cut if we're in shutdown.
Well, you Speak of the Eliminate Shutdowns Act. As a matter of fact, we're going to have Senator Ron Johnson on with us on the late edition of Balance of Power at 5 o'clock. So we've got both chambers covered here, Congressman. Isn't this the very reason why you're out? You're going to run for governor instead of put up with more of this?
No, I'm really not running away from Washington, D.C. I mean, it's been an honor of a lifetime. I do feel like I'm relevant. I get to be in a lot of rooms where we're trying to make America better. And frankly, the Republican House has done a much better job in the last 9 months than I think most people expected. So, no, I'm not running away from D.C. I'm really running toward my state that I love. And I think we've got some important things to do. And I think I'm the leader to help get them done.
And Congressman, I do want to pivot to another topic just quickly in our final minutes with you, and that has to do with tariffs, because we've seen a flurry of new announcements from President Trump in the past few days. And your fellow South Dakota colleague, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, did say, or suggested rather, in an interview over the weekend that there are discussions about a potential bailout for U.S. farmers. You, of course, represent a top agriculture producing state. I'm wondering if you've had any discussions about what those potential solutions would look like.
Yeah, the last time we got into a trade dispute with China, American farmers were, again, the tip of the spear. A lot of the harm of that trade dispute fell on farmers. So Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue did put together a pretty good plan in 2 different tranches to help American producers. We're probably in a better position today to be able to finance that than we were back then. We've got hundreds of billions of dollars of tariff revenue coming in. I think most members of Congress, whether they're urban or rural, understand that spending some of that tariff revenue to try to shave down some of the most jagged edges of what the American farmer is going through probably would be helpful. China's doing everything they can to hurt the American soybean farmer. We probably need to, we absolutely should help the American soybean farmer get through this rough patch.